am so excited about this topic, y'all. It is so hard to talk about friendship in 20 minutes. Um, I feel like that's like asking a Baptist minister to do a sermon in 20 minutes, especially when it's something you're so passionate about. So I will do my due diligence in making this fun and insightful and timely. So first, we are going to talk about qualities of healthy female friendships. I came up with the title Framily Matters, of course, blending friends and family. And if you're on this call, you either love your girlfriends or you're going through something with your girlfriends, you want to be a better friend or you want to cultivate better friendships. And so certainly appreciate the interest. We're also going to talk about how friendships impact mental health and interestingly, physical health and other aspects of health from a holistic standpoint. And we're going to talk about ways to cultivate friendships and more so honor them. There are a lot of books out there about how to be a better friend, how to improve your friendships, but this is really about honoring friendships. And I was going to start with this friendship meditation, but y'all, it was 5 minutes, and that's like a quarter of the time that I have. So I will record that and share at a later date, but I will invite you to just pause for a second. I know we all multitask. I know we are all thinking of 50 million things, but if you could just bring to your awareness your dear friendships. Who comes to mind when I say, that girl who has your back or that friend you love, even though you haven't talked to them in a long time or hung out with them? So definitely this is about honoring friendships. So think about that, and as you focus and kind of settle in, family, girlfriends who are like family, those non-biological, non-blood related girls that we love, women that we love, and we lean on and we depend on and share special feelings for. One second, slides. And so throughout the conference, the loneliness epidemic has come up quite a bit. So why talk about female friendships? Number one, because in addition to the Surgeon General in 2023 identifying the loneliness epidemic, what may be missed is in 2000, the power of female friendships was identified as a protective factor. We know when women gather, magic happens, the world changes and heals, and we just feel good being around our girlfriends. And so, honestly, close relationships have declined since the pandemic, and those have resulted in detrimental mental and physical outcomes, negative health outcomes. On a personal note, I don't have any sisters. So I have had to grow up being intentional about cultivating my relationships with my girlfriends, with my female friends. Earlier on, my cousins were like family, still are. And throughout every stage of my life, from daycare to elementary and middle, to high school to grad school, and even in the professional circle, I have just learned to cherish and love and hold dear my female friendships. Also, I will say that as a marriage and family therapist, I think friendships and the impact of friendship dynamics is often minimized, even in the therapeutic sense, let alone in society. Oftentimes, we talk about work-related stress. We talk about the stress of our romantic partnerships. We talk about parenting stress, or the journey to become a parent, if that's on the table for you or a part of your plan. But we rarely talk about and give time and adequate space to honor friendships and to even talk about sometimes even the stress that people have related to friendships. And so I know firsthand, being a therapist, sometimes women feel like they have to apologize for talking about how some kind of friendship woe has impacted them. So that's something that I try to destigmatize. So when I mention family, who comes to mind? We all have different types of girls that we love, different types of women we love. We might share a role, right? That parent is also a teen mom, or that person is also recovering from a similar illness, and maybe we met them at the doctor's office or in recovery. Someone is in our book club. Maybe you have that ride out friend, right? That person who will just go to the ends of the earth with you. And you know that's who you need to call when you need somebody to have your back. The consoling friend, the one whose shoulder you cry on. The workout buddy or the foodie friend who's always up for making reservations at the next restaurant. The childhood comrade, maybe you grew up together and you've kept touch over the years. Maybe you have a spiritual alignment, your prayer partner, right? Somebody who you worship with and or pray with. The study buddy, if you're in school, your work bestie, the fun friend, the college friend, the list goes on and on. And I will say that these are not mutually exclusive, right? Some people cross categories and play different roles, but these are all the types of women that come into our lives. And even with this last one now, we have digital acquaintances, right? Social media calls them friends, and that's, I guess, to be determined in terms of the quality of it being a real friendship. But we definitely have associations and acquaintances that I would say we become friendly with, and that counts as well. So I put a poll out, an informal poll, to friends and family and people online, and I asked them to come up with some favorite movies and shows that represent female friendships and all types of dynamics. So this is what came up. So feel free to drop some more in the chat if you have things to add, and also feel free to jot these down or take a screenshot if you've never seen them, because they provide great opportunity and food for thought to think about friends. Some of the ones that come to mind in terms of like your fun friend, right? Maybe you may not go on a girls' trip to New Orleans and partake in some things and have a good time, but hey, maybe you will, but maybe you have that friend that you can hang out with and it's just a big stress reliever. Maybe you need someone to have your back, right? I don't know if you'll drive cross country and be on the run with them like Thelma and Louise. Maybe you will. But it's something to think about. Maybe you need somebody to remind you to fight and keep your head up like Color Purple, or somebody to really just kind of give you, to keep you in check, right, with some of these other shows. And so I won't spend too much time on that in the interest of time, but definitely thinking about and even taking it a step further and having conversations with your friends about what these shows and movies bring up in terms of dynamics and lessons learned. So I'm going to touch briefly on what the research says about a concept called tend and befriend. In 1998, Dr. Taylor from UCLA, excuse me, did research on the social implications of stress. And so essentially she wanted to find out, okay, besides fight or flight, how do women cope? Right? If it's not just about withdrawing or being aggressive, what else comes up, or what comes up in addition to that dynamic? And hence tend and befriend. And what the results showed is that women care for one another and seek support as a dynamic, as a coping strategy. And that needs to be equally honored, just like the fight and flight mechanism that we talk about so frequently. And everyone that I'm referencing, there's a citation if you want to read their books or articles. So I will leave that slide up for a few minutes at the end if you also want to take a screenshot. From a scientific perspective, we know a little bit, and maybe you know a lot, about oxytocin and the opioid system. So oxytocin is that feel-good hormone, that bonding hormone that we experience when we are around women that we care for and who care for us. It helps us feel close and connected. And when we're stressed, oxytocin encourages us biologically, chemically, to seek support from the people, whether it be friends, family, or loved ones, rather than facing the stress alone. And so it's part of that brain body network as well, and it keeps us calm, especially and particularly when it's people we trust. And so when we do this, when we reach out for positive social support, talking to someone, even the touchy-feely hug, that we get sometimes in the embrace from a friend, it reduces the negative effects of even physical stress, right? So in the same way we bring up mindfulness meditation and regulating your nervous system, from a social, emotional, relational standpoint, this tend and befriend dynamic works wonders for our health. So, Framily helps us calm down by connection and bonding. Now, I'm going to keep it real because I am a truth teller, even though I am an optimist. Not all friendships are created equal, and nor should they be. And so I want to briefly touch on some of the challenges of honoring friendships. Sometimes when it feels phony, right? When it just doesn't feel when it feels forced, that's a problem. When there's a spirit of competition, that's a problem and can be toxic. And when things get hard, right, we tend to abandon friendships. As I stated earlier, sometimes people are even embarrassed to talk about this in therapy or to open up, or they pretend like it doesn't bother them when it equally can be just as hurtful as blood family or a romantic breakup. So it's hard to be vulnerable, right? When there's a spirit of phoniness or jealousy, when there are power dynamics, when there's a sense of emotional immaturity, when it feels one-sided, when you feel violated, when you feel disrespected, and when after being around this person, you just feel empty or depleted. And Alice Walker, in her book In Search of Our Mother's Garden, says no person is your friend or kin who demands your silence, denies your right to grow, or perceives your being fully blossomed as a threat or something other than it should be. And so if you always feel drained or duped, it's not a good sign. It doesn't mean that it's not worth trying to salvage, but pay attention to the intentionality around friendships. Moving on to the qualities, the opposite comes into play, right? When we feel respected, when we feel trusted, when we feel like we can be emotionally naked with our girlfriends, that works wonders. When there are healthy boundaries in the relationship, when that person is not offended if you can't come to an event because they really know you and maybe they know you're introverted or just have a lot going on and they're not going to take it as a personal attack. When and this is can be a whole nother workshop, but attachment certainly has implications for friendships. If someone is securely attached, they will just kind of let things rub off their shoulders and assume that they're worthy of love and not overly sensitive to rejection. When someone is anxiously attached, it might be something to where they fear abandonment or feel self-critical, or the opposite, right? You can be a doormat. So anything your friend wants to do, you always go along with that, and that creates an awkward vibe. And then the sometimes people convince themselves that they don't need friends, right? They just need their family, or they just will focus on the parenting or caregiving role, or just focus on work. And so there might be something to be said from a therapeutic standpoint, from a psychological standpoint about attachment and how that plays in. And if you're interested in that, Franco has a book who's mentioned in the references about that. And as it relates to boundaries in friendships, we need to understand that there are different types of boundaries: your financial boundaries, your time boundaries, and your emotional and physical boundaries. And so thinking about the ways in which healthy boundaries within female friendships can help create a solid foundation. And in Jackson's book, Fighting for Friendships, she talks about three affinities that make female friendships attractive and fulfilling. When there is symmetry, when there is secrecy, and this doesn't mean like keeping secrets, it means I can be emotionally vulnerable around you and you hold that dear, and vice versa. And when there's support, whether that's physical or emotional support. And so the impact of healthy female friendships is that it gives us a safe place to land. It gives us a place to feel vulnerable. It gives us validation and security. And so when I talk about girlfriends give us roots, I'm going to read briefly the scientific definition of a root. And as I do this, think about the implications or the metaphor for friendships. Roots are essential for survival and overall ecosystem health. They act as the primary anchor, the nutrient absorber, and the storage unit in cold months or times of low resource availability. They stabilize the soil. They hold soil particles together to prevent erosion. They facilitate water intake, store food, and provide structural support against environmental stressors and produce hormones to regulate growth. And if you didn't think of some good girlfriends that are like your roots, then maybe do some reflection and maybe the opposite, honor the friendships where you feel like that. And so many of us also learn that female friendships should never be seen as just as important as family or even close. And so a great majority of the time, that's where we first learn about caring and giving outside of family, of course. And women push us to do better. They champion us and they celebrate our successes when it's a healthy friendship. Also, they give us hope. And in Bradford's book called Sisterhood Heals, she talks about how girlfriends help us feel seen. They help us learn about ourselves. She calls that self-knowledge, feel supported, and they help us soften, particularly in the world where everybody expects us to prioritize everybody else except ourselves and to have this hardened exterior and be a workhorse and not really let our hair down and be vulnerable and honor what we need. And Bell Hooks says that the first glimpse of redemptive love and caring community is often our relationship with our girlfriends. So, how do we cultivate and honor family? We do that from a place of fondness, right? Do you express appreciation to your female friends? Do you show affection? We do that from a place of reciprocity, the give and the take. Don't always be the one, don't let the other person always be the one reaching out. Obviously, things happen in the world and we all are strapped for time, but it's important to kind of have give and take. Be authentic and be be yourself and be vulnerable. Have meaningful interactions beyond surface level. Be intentional about connecting. Listen and lend an ear and learn and know your girlfriend and what they need and what you need. And then yield. When there's conflict, learn how to consider multiple perspectives and don't always sweep things under the rug. Everything doesn't have to be fight or flight. And so I want to pause right now so that we can reclaim family relationships and take a moment to do that from a place of mindfulness. So sit with yourself and reflect on a time when a girlfriend supported you, kept you grounded, and vice versa. When you supported them, and they kept you grounded. When a girlfriend inspired you and helped you grow, and when you inspired them and helped them grow. So I'll end with this quote and then open it up for Q&A if we have time. Deep abiding friendships are the place where many women know lasting love. The work of healing is shared, the pain, the joy. We can develop primary bonds in platonic relationships that are constant, committed, and able to last a lifetime. These relationships ensure that the woman who does not find a perfect mate will still know true and abiding love. And at the end of the day, it is this love that sustains us and gives us life meaning. Along the way, we do find soulmates, true friends, and life companions. We find communion. Another great wisdom gift that women offer to those who have not yet discovered its pleasures is the wisdom that it's better to know the joy of dancing in a circle of love than to dance alone. And for all my Grey's Anatomy fans, one of my favorite scenes is when Christina and Meredith would always dance it out. So hopefully you have a friend to dance it out with, to laugh with, to cry with, to pray with, to fight with when you need to remind you to take care of yourself. Because like they say in Sex and the City, Maybe girlfriends sometimes in the moment are our true soulmates. So when I think about wings, how do girlfriends give us wings? Wings are appendages for survival, specialized roots for flight, locomotion, and help conserve energy and support. They allow animals to evade predators and allow rapid escape. And specialized wings have pest control and help us find food sources and hunt. Sometimes they also help with mate attraction, courtship displays, and habitat stabilization. So I hope that in your life you agree that family matters and that your girlfriends give you roots and wings. Here are the references if you want to take a screenshot, and if you'll be able to also pull them up from the recording. And then here is my information if you would like to stay in touch or follow up to provide additional feedback. I will take share screen off and answer any questions or take any comments. Oh, can you please? Okay, alrighty. Well, thank you all.
I think we have a question from a Marcy Washington.
Okay.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Dr. Thomas, I'm curious, and I understand the value of friendships and all the goodness, but talk to me a little bit more about when we think about this current world we live in 2026. Yes, I'm going political for those who don't know me, such is life. But thinking about friendships, how do we control for friends that are reinforcing these spaces of cultural violence and structural violence, and how do we move away from them, especially when they're reinforcing these circles of power dynamics of us versus them? Thank you.
Absolutely. Great question. I think it starts with pondering how you define friend and how you set the kind of boundaries that are going to protect you and keep you emotionally, physically, and psychologically safe. It does not have to be something that you apologize for, in the same way that if you felt threatened in a dark corner and didn't know where your car was, your instincts would kick in, your survival mode. And so it's the same thing, because we often minimize the emotional stress that is put upon us. Now, obviously, it's a totally different dynamic if you have to still be in a person's physical space, because maybe there are shared roles. Maybe you work with them, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe you're working with them on some other kind of project. And so again, how can you regulate yourself during, but find a way to decompress? And also sometimes in the moment, you can, if it's safe to do so, pull the person to the side to reiterate what your boundaries are, so that they are clear that if you still have to do XYZ together, this is how you're going to disengage. And these are the rules of operation. But if you have the choice, if you have the power to remove yourself from their presence, and I'm an optimist at heart. Again, I would like to think that some relationships can be salvaged, but maybe not. So if that person is open and receptive to the impact on you, and open to healing and growing and listening and learning together, then there might be the potential for that. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
I think there was another hand up a moment ago, but there's a question in the chat in the meantime. Are you able
Okay,
to see that, or would you like
let
to
me
read it out loud?
let me scroll. My question is, there's a trend among working moms, mostly young kids, who have no time to nurture friendships, and it's having a profound impact on their mental health. How can I support them to make it a priority? Yes, 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 and yes. You can't force them to make it a priority, but you can ask them the difference that they've noticed when they've had little moments of opportunities to do that. Now, personally, I can relate to this because I am a working mom. I am married. There have been times in my life where I've been doing way too much. And so, in the same way that you have to be intentional about scheduling that doctor's appointment and getting proper sleep and proper nutrition, if something that feeds your soul is your time with your girlfriends, make time to do that. Maybe you can't take a girls' trip for the weekend, but can you meet them at a coffee shop for 30 minutes? Can you text them? Can you have a Zoom chat for 10 minutes if phone just isn't cutting it anymore? Can you send them a card and say, girl, I love you. I'm so busy, but I'm thinking about you. And let me know maybe if you got some time 3 weeks from now and we can put something on the books. So you can't make them, but you can help them understand the value and the impact. I hope I answered your question, Donna.
You did. Thank you so much. That was great.
Thanks. All right. I know that there's another presentation at 4:30, so I want to be respectful of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That was incredible.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.